Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me again for day 3 of our year through the ESV Study Bible. We have gone through our couple of prep days. We looked at some good things as far as how the Bible is constructed, the ESV Study Bible itself, the ESV Bible itself. And then we started looking at Genesis as a whole, and then we have read now Genesis chapter 1 through chapter 8. Today we will get into Genesis chapter 9 through 11. However, before we do that, I've talked about these articles and different resources that are within the ESV Study Bible, and I want to make sure I get through them throughout the year. And I talked about trying to figure out if I was going to do it on Saturday or not, and I think that's probably the best way to do so. Here is a list of the articles that are in the back of the book that we will go through. We will not go through them in order. I've chosen an order to go through them based upon where I think we are in the text to try to make it relevant. Sometimes some things are just going to just come up, or we may start a particular section, biblical ethics. Once we start that, we're just going to go straight through the biblical ethics section and stuff like that. Okay. When we get into like the canon of Scripture, canon of the Old Testament, we'll do that. We won't do the New Testament and the Apocrypha at the same time because we're not getting that there. So the same thing with like the reliability of the biblical manuscripts. We'll do the Old Testament manuscripts while we're reading the Old Testament. We'll do the New Testament manuscripts while we're reading the New Testament. So same for the archaeology of the Bible. Today we're going to look at the original languages only because we started talking about that during prep day 1, and I actually messed up a snafu on the example that I gave with the equal weights and measures. I said that it was they were translating the phrase stone, but really it's just stone, and we'll talk about that later once we get into this article here. So we'll read this today, and then we won't get to the Greek and how it works until we get to the New Testament. And so these are the articles here, and I've set up a schedule. I set up a schedule for us here. Kind of made like a little table of the articles there, and then so I'll have every Saturday here. This is the one that we're gonna do today. Every time we do one, I'll end up highlighting it green so that we know we've gone through all of them. So we have that. So next week we'll get into God and His relationship to creation, especially since we're in Genesis, and then we'll do certain things here. So this is our layout for how we'll handle the articles and resources. Okay. And now today we'll get back to our plan. Again, we're in Genesis chapter 9. We're going to read to chapter 11, and then we're going to get into the notes, and then we'll get into the article on Hebrew and how it works, and how it's being translated into English. And then after that, I'll discuss my little snafu on the equal weights and measures and how that's being translated. Okay. All right. Now let's get into the Bible. All right, Genesis chapter 9, chapter 9 through 11. Now, before I get started, one thing I do want to say, as we get into this reading, there is a very long genealogy in this reading, and there are a lot of names that I'm probably going to slip up on because, one, like I said, I don't read Hebrew, but also, two, a lot of these names are foreign to us. And so, unless you're someone who is constantly in this particular text and seeing these names and hearing these names over and over again, you're gonna slip up on them. I will do well with many of them and many names that most people might slip up on, only because I've just by sheer luck of spending more time in the text. It has nothing to do with my genius or not. Also, too, to be honest, we are all saying the names wrong because we're not saying the Hebrew version of the names. We're saying a Anglophiled way of saying the names in English, and we are all messing them up. So if you are reading it yourself and you are feeling bad about messing up the names, do not feel bad about it. We're all messing the names up. But just so things can be easier for you, and if you feel like you are stumbling on the names, so much so that it is messing up how you're able to read it, one, you can literally just say the first letter of the name if you want to, or just to help for the flow of reading, or do not hesitate to utilize the technology that we have today and listen to it. Right, you can listen to it either on whatever app you are using. I like to use the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app on my phone to listen to the Bible. I think Bible, there's a listening version here on Bible Gateway. So doing that, there are people that I'm assuming that they've been paid to read that version out into English and to not stumble upon the names. And so you can at least hear how whoever is reading that version, how they are saying the names, and maybe practice, or especially if it's a name that's going to be repeated a lot, you can do that. So without further ado, we'll get into it. Genesis chapter 9 to chapter 11. All right. And just a reminder of where we have been so far. Genesis chapter 1, God created the earth. Then we saw a highlighted version of God's creation of the sixth day of creating man and woman. In Genesis chapter 2, chapter 3, we saw the fall in the garden with the serpent, and then the humans were banished out. Chapter 4, we get Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel and then is banished away from society, and then we get his genealogy. Chapter 5, we get the genealogy from Adam to Noah, and we get connections between the genealogy that we see in chapter 4 and the genealogy that we see in chapter 5. Chapter 6, we are introduced to Noah, and then chapter 7 and 8, we get a discussion of the flood, and then once the flood is done, and then there is the end of chapter 8. There is the recreation after God has destroyed things. So like the decreation, and then there's the recreation, and then now we are on the backside of that. Here we go. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea, Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I give you the green, sorry. Goodness gracious. Let me start this over. All right. Genesis chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and on all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be for food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. From every beast, I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. The sons of Noah who went forth from the ark are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the people of the whole earth were dispersed. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank the wine and became drunk, and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backwards, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these, the coastland peoples spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sapta, Ramah, and Saptica. The sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. The Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land, he went into Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Resen, between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Egypt fathered Ludim, Anamin, Lahaban, Naphtahim, Pathrasim, Cassilham, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorim. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Archites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. Afterward, the clans of the Canaanites dispersed, and the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. To Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, children were born. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hol, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. To Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almadad, Sheleph, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadaran, Uzel, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Mesha in the direction of Sephar to the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their generations, in their nations. And from these, the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there and over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there, the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. These are the generations of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he fathered Arpachshad 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arpachshad had lived 35 years, he fathered Shelah. And Arpachshad lived after he fathered Shelah 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he fathered Eber. And Shelah lived after he fathered Eber 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he fathered Peleg. And Eber lived after he fathered Peleg 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he fathered Reu. And Peleg lived after he fathered Reu 209 years and had other sons and daughters. When Reu had lived 32 years, he fathered Serug. And Reu lived after he fathered Serug 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he fathered Nahor. And Serug lived after he fathered Nahor 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he fathered Terah. And Nahor lived after he fathered Terah 119 years and had other sons and daughters. When Terah had lived 70 years, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now, these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah, in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now, Sarai was barren. She had no child. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son, Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. This is the word of the Lord. All right. Let's head back here. We are right here. Let's blow this up a little bit. Let's get into the notes. While God's speech here closely parallels chapter 1, verses 28 to 30, two important changes are introduced. First, the positive instruction to exercise dominion over the living creatures is replaced by the negative comment that they will fear and dread human beings. Second, whereas the emphasis was previously on peoples eating from plants, humans are now given permission to be carnivorous. While God now permits the taking of animal life for food, the animal's blood remains sacred and is not to be consumed, as an acknowledgement that all life is from God. See Leviticus chapter 17, verses 12 to 14. We'll see that when we get there later on in the year. But again, this speaks to the fact that I do think that the audience for this is those Israelites inside the desert. All right. And so they're probably starting to understand the origins of the laws that Moses has given them, and stuff like that. So, what we see in Leviticus, they get now to attach it to they get an origin story of, oh, okay, hey, here's when we started eating animals, and here's when God first said you can't eat the blood. Right? Chapter 9, verse 5 to 6. Following his comments about the killing of animals, God addresses the issue of homicide, violence by all flesh, verse 11, i.e., by man and animals, prompted God to send the flood, chapter 6, verses 11 and 13. If human nature has not improved after the flood, chapter 6, verse 5, chapter 8, verse 21, how is violence to be prevented in the future? This legal enactment is the answer. From his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. This means that any animal or person that takes a human life will be held accountable by God, working through human representatives. For example, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, and chapter 21, verse 28. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. Here, the principle of talion, a life for a life, is applied. See Exodus chapter 21, verse 23. This measured response is preferable to Lamech's 77-fold vengeance. Genesis chapter 4, verse 24. Human life is to be valued so highly that it is protected by this system of punishment. I don't know. I thought I had a better system for pulling this up, but no. All right, so it's preferable because God made man in his own image. And so to murder another human being is to murder what is most like God, and is thus implicitly an attack on God himself. Many would see this statement as establishing the moral principle permitting the death penalty in cases of murder, with the understanding that the person charged would have been justly tried and his guilt established beyond any reasonable doubt. Cross-reference the Old Testament requirement of 2 to 3 witnesses. Deuteronomy 19, chapter 19, verse 15. Repeated in the New Testament, for example, in Matthew chapter 18, verse 16, and Hebrews chapter 10, verse 28. A further requirement is that such a death penalty verdict must always be carried out under the jurisdiction of the established authorities. Cross-reference Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15 to 21, Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 5. The difficulty of establishing guilt beyond any reasonable doubt and the difficulty of ensuring justice in a modern, complex urban society as compared to an ancient village-based society underscore the great care and caution that must be taken in applying this principle today. I bet I'm reading that again. I don't understand how it would be more difficult to establish guilt now than it was then. Then there's no cameras. Then they're only going off of the word of witnesses. Now we have DNA, camera. I don't know about that line, but as far as it being more difficult now to establish it than it would have been then, in an ancient village-based society. I don't know. I don't know about that, but however, yes, this does for many of those who are Christians who argue for the death penalty. This is where that comes from, right? That this is literally the first rule that God gives to Noah after the flood, right? So he tells him likewise to be fruitful and multiply. But then he gives this, hey, don't eat the blood of animals. And then I guess this would be the first penalty, right? The first penalty for anything, right? Hey, don't, no one should kill anybody else. But if somebody does kill, their life will be taken from them, and their life will be taken from them by other people. All right? From his fellow man, I will require a reckoning for the life of man. So a lot of times people say, hey, we can't do the death penalty because the government will have to do it. Well, for Christians, people who follow the Bible, that can't be one of your arguments, because a part of the verse from God is from fellow man, from other imperfect men who get things wrong, who are not perfect. God will use them to take the life of someone who took someone else's life. Okay. So the fact that people and governments are imperfect cannot be an excuse for why not to utilize the death penalty. Right. Now, beyond that, a lot of these things are very important. What the ESV Study Bible notes, right? That the only way that the death penalty can be used is after there's a person charged has been justly tried and his guilt established beyond any reasonable doubt. That has to happen, right? Beyond any reasonable doubt, once they're guilty, then the death penalty can happen, right? And this idea of the requirement of 2 to 3 witnesses, right? Which is pretty synonymous with sufficient evidence, right? So only with sufficient evidence can their guilt be established. Once their guilt is established, only then can the death penalty happen, right? Now, what does this mean, right? So this is on both sides of the coin, right? This is for both the people who want the death penalty to establish a high view of justice and order, and for people on the other side who are afraid of doing this, right? On both sides of the coin, people are involved, right? And it will not be perfect. However, this is what the Lord gives us to deal with the sinfulness of man, right? As we talked about yesterday, and as the ESV Study Bible notes, that even though there was a recreation, right, the sinfulness of man is still here, right? And with the sinfulness of man still being here, the propensity towards violence and the propensity towards murder is still going to happen. And so this is what God gives as a remedy, as a way to deal with that part of human sin, right? He gives this imperfect system. Okay, the system is not perfect. Why? Because humans are involved in it, right? By humans, you're going to have the death penalty go forth. They're going to be the ones to make sure the death penalty happens, right? Also, too, by humans, they're going to be the ones who are required to have sufficient evidence to establish someone's guilt, which means that some people who are guilty will be let off. For those of you who want perfect justice, guess what? Sometimes someone who you know that person is guilty. But if within the court system, during the trial, if it is impossible to establish their guilt beyond reasonable doubt, and a jury of their peers, which is the system that we have, are not able to establish the fact that that person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, you cannot have the death penalty. You cannot give them the death penalty. Okay, that's how it is. That's a part of what we must deal with on this side east of Eden and before Christ comes, right? The imperfections within the system. So also too, with trying to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, okay, there are some times where some people who are not guilty will be found guilty based upon the evidence, right? And I would say, right, in our day, this is why I don't get this line here, because in our day, it will be closer to being able to establish the fact of someone's guilt more than it would in their day, right? There's DNA, there's cameras, there's ways of establishing where somebody would have been at the time, cell phone towers to be able to ping people's location and stuff like that. There's all these different things where back then, really somebody could have been coerced to falsely accuse, 2 or 3 people could have said, "Oh, hey, yep, we saw him. We saw him, get the knife or get the rock and kill that person," right? And they could be colluding together. And on that, during that trial, no matter how much that person pleaded, that could be enough to sway the jury, and that person could be found guilty, right? Even though that person was innocent. And so that is within the system, right? So within that system, imperfect people will have to go through and make the death penalty happen, okay? They're going to be the ones who are going to have to put down the person who is found guilty of murder. Also within that system, you're going to have imperfect human beings who are going to have to establish guilt or innocence, which means that sometimes the guilty will go free and sometimes the innocent will be found guilty. That is the system that God gives us. And we must do the best with it that we can. And for those who call yourselves believers, I will say, and there's a capital punishment article in here. I haven't read it yet. We'll read it once we get there. And I might end up, disagreeing with the ESV Study Bible on it, on some things. I might be in agreement there. But for Christians, folks who call yourselves believers, okay, to be against the death penalty because of the imperfections that are inherent within trying to actually make the death penalty happen, right? Going through with it. You cannot use the imperfections as an excuse not to do so. This is what God has given us. Because if we do not do it, guess what? We are saying it is okay to hurt God's image. Okay. Now, going back to what we were discussing yesterday, on day 1 about the image of God and the dangers we run into if we only look at the image of God based upon the capacity of humans to do certain things, right? Because then if we leave that as the measurement of who has God's image and who does not, and not say that it is just a stamp of authentication that all humans just have, just because God has said so. If we go with the capacities thing, then we leave room for, well, since certain people are not capable of doing certain things, then it is okay then to take their life. And if you know history at all, this is not far-fetched, right? How much murder, how much slavery was done in the with the excuse of, well, those people are less than human or subhuman or a second tier of human, right? So we don't want to get into that game by getting the idea of the Imago Dei, the image of God, people being image bearers. We don't want to get that wrong, so that we can protect life. All right, moving on. Chapter 9, verse 7. God's speech ends as it begins in verse 1, repeating what was said in chapter 8, verse 17, and echoing chapter 1, verse 28. God wants humanity to flourish and not to be destroyed by violence or another flood. This positive view of population growth, cross-reference note on chapter 1, verse 28, stands in sharp contrast to the Babylonian flood story, which ends with the gods taking measures to inhibit mankind from filling the earth. Again, as I've repeated before about the book of Genesis, what Moses is doing is trying to speak against, or trying to have an argument against what is already understood by people in that area at that time, right? They are understanding the gods and this catastrophic flood event in a particular way, right? And so Moses is trying to say, no, you guys have gotten it wrong. And he is presenting the all-powerful Yahweh, the God of Israel, as the one true God who brought the flood for a particular reason, but he is not annoyed with humans and does not want to limit humans, but he wants humans to flourish because he loves them and has a tender relationship with them. Okay. Chapter 9, verses 9 to 11. God outlines the covenant he is now establishing with all living creatures. Having mentioned it briefly before the flood in chapter 6, verse 18. Before I get there, real quick, something I found interesting about the God holding mankind accountable for taking another man's life. It also says that he will where is it at? Yeah, any animal or person that takes human life will be held accountable by God. That God will hold animals accountable for harming his image. I wonder what that says about animals. All right. You know, they're the agency of animals to know and understand kind of what they're doing and how they are interacting with humans. So just food for thoughts there. Something I've thought about every time I come across that verse and certain things that I see in Leviticus. All right. God outlines the covenant he is now establishing with all living creatures, having mentioned it briefly before the flood in 6:18, right? So this is when he said that he won't curse the ground anymore. This is the first covenant explicitly named in Genesis. See note on chapter 2, verse 17. A similar covenant is later established with Abraham and his descendants in chapter 17. A covenant formally binds two parties together in a relationship on the basis of mutual personal commitment with consequences for keeping or breaking the commitment. God makes this kind of covenant with a group of people by covenanting with one who represents them. Everyone else then experiences the covenant by virtue of being included in the representative. See note on chapter 12, verse 3. Here, the animals are included as well as Noah's descendants, showing Noah to be a kind of new Adam, emphasizing that the covenant is for all living creatures. God states that there will never again be a flood to destroy the earth. All right. So God makes a promise to Noah for all creatures, right? And because we are all descendants of Noah, we all get to be a part of that covenant where God is promising not to destroy the whole earth again, right? So there will be localized destruction. There will be particular destruction at times, but as far as the entire earth, not going to do it. Okay. Before covenants, chapter 9, verse 12 to 17. Different covenants have appropriate signs or symbols linked to them. Circumcision is the sign of the covenant with Abraham in chapter 17. And the Sabbath is the sign of the covenant with Israel on Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 31, 12 to 17. On this occasion, God's designated sign is the rainbow, Genesis chapter 9, verse 13. Its presence when rain clouds are in the sky will be a visible reminder of God's everlasting covenant, verse 16. It is not necessary to think that rainbows first began to exist at this time. In any case, God says that he will now use rainbows as a sign of this covenant. This sign should be interpreted as symbolizing that God has hung up his warrior's bow, since there is no hint of that meaning in the text. Okay. Yeah, so basically saying like nothing in the text says that God first put the rainbow there um uh at that time, right? But it was something that was always there, but now he's using that rainbow that is naturally there. He's using that as a sign to remind him of the covenant, right? So every time the rainbow goes, that's a reminder to God that, hey, I'm not destroying the entire earth or all of life at once again, right? So that's him keeping his promise. So every time you see a rainbow, you can smile and think about the mercy that God has um, towards all living creatures, humans and animals alike, um, and how he has continued to uphold his end of the bargain regarding not destroying all life on earth again. Chapter 9, verses 18 to 19. These verses, which bring the flood story to an end, anticipate the next two episodes. The reference to Ham's son Canaan, verse 18, prepares for the events of verses 20 to 29. The mention of peoples being dispersed over the whole earth, verse 19, is developed in chapter 10. Chapter 9, verses 20 and 29, the cursing of Canaan. This unusual episode provides an unexpected sequel to the flood story. After the flood and the new creation comes another fall by Noah, a sort of second Adam, in that he, like Adam, is father of the whole human race. It also anticipates similar activity by Lot's daughters after the destruction of Sodom, chapter 19, verses 30 to 38. Noah's drunkenness and Ham's indiscretion result in contrasting announcements regarding the futures of Shem, Japheth, and Ham's son Canaan. Yeah, so a couple things here. Let me see if they get to it. Before I say something. The reference to Noah as a man of the soil and his success is in growing vines points to a fresh start after the flood, right? So him being a man of the soil, right? Going back to Adam was put in the garden, right? To till and to manage the garden, right? So that things would grow there. And Noah now after the flood becomes a man of the soil, right? And so he is where Adam was cursed to his toil on the ground. He would then there will be a lot of work and pain in his toil, right? Let me since I'm kind of stumbling over my words, let me go back to the verse. I'm not going to go to it on the screen. Just I'm doing it from the Study Bible, right? So Genesis chapter 3, verse 17. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Right? Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you are taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So, So Adam's curse is that toiling for food is going to be hard for him, right? Um, and Noah, who is getting rest from the curse, or bringing comfort, as Lamech kind of prophesied about him. He now is, as he becomes a man of the soil, he has success in growing things, right? So it does not say that he is not having to sweat for it, right? But there is, he has, quick success from his toil, right? So a slight reversal. However, as Adam was cursed after eating of the fruit, right? Noah now consumes the fruit of his labor, right? But overconsumes, right? So he is not necessarily um, disobeying a direct command of God. At least we don't see anywhere in the text where there's a command against drunkenness. However, there is overconsumption, right? And remember what when we talked about God resting on the seventh day, right, and being the God of enough. Noah here is not practicing what God has practiced, right? Hey, I've done this, done enough, right? Where Noah has done his work and wants to consume his work, right? But now overconsumes his work, right? And in his overconsumption, he becomes drunk, okay? And then we see the ramifications of that. All right. Chapter 9, verse 21 to 23, became drunk. The brevity of the description of Noah's drunkenness is an indication of disapproval. Ham's actions, however, all right, so basically they're saying that this is part of like a literary device of, because it's so quick. The Moses is here is trying to say, hey, this is not a good thing, right? He became drunk, right? Not good. Ham's actions, however, are the object of serious criticism because Ham unashamedly looks on the nakedness of his father in the tent and then reports this to his brothers, verse 22. There is no indication, however, that perverse sexual behavior was involved in addition to Ham seeing his father drunk and naked. Though the text does not explicitly state what happened, it is clear that Ham humiliated and dishonored his father, and that he apparently sought to make his brothers a party to that humiliation. Instead, Ham's brothers make every effort to avoid seeing Noah's naked body, as readers are told twice that they approached him backward. The response of Shem and Japheth is in sharp contrast to Ham's actions, as the brothers honor their father despite his foolish behavior. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Let me see something real quick. Okay, I just want to make sure it didn't say anything here. All right, so this line here about the text is not explicitly stay whatever. Oh, there's no indication, however, that perverse sexual behavior was involved in addition to Sam seeing his father drunk and naked. Okay, I will say there is controversy here. There is controversy here on whether there was perverse sexual behavior involved. Okay. And I will try to link an article that discusses this, because I will say amongst biblical scholars, there is controversy whether or not there is sexual behavior going on, right? Not necessarily Ham toward Noah, but Ham toward his mother. Okay. And the reason why biblical scholars think that there is something going on between Ham and his mother, Noah's wife, right, is because of the emphasis on Canaan. Okay. Canaan has not done anything. However, Canaan being the son of Ham, why is he mentioned along with this episode? Okay. Might he be the product of Ham seeing the nakedness of his father, right? Now, again, we have talked about, and even the ESV Study Bible has said that they think that the audience of the book of Genesis is the Israelites in the desert, right? Now, a part of the Mosaic law, right, is that you shall not look upon the nakedness of your father. And the nakedness of your father is your mother, right? And so let me try to see. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull that up. So let's see. One of the good things about Bible Gateway is you can do keyword search. Nakedness. And then doing the keyword search, it'll bring up every time that okay, so Leviticus 18. Okay, let's bring up the verse numbers. Oh, sorry. Computer is acting slow when it comes to this. No, let's just read it here. All right, so Leviticus 18. None of you shall approach any one of his relatives to uncover nakedness. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your sister, your father's daughter, or your mother's daughter, whether brought up in the family or another at home, right? And so, so we see this, and yeah, so this idea of Noah's nakedness, right? Well, hearing that, there's a question: are we talking about Noah being naked or his mother, right? You know, so what's going on, right? Yeah, so that is what we're talking about there. So let's go back to Genesis 11. And let's read that again. Just to see after we read that, how someone, whether it be a biblical scholar or the first hearers, might think, oh wait, is it Noah or Noah's wife? Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers." All right, now the way that it goes here, right? The argument for, hey, maybe there's something sexual going on, right? Noah began to be a man of the soil, planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. Okay, now him laying uncovered, right? If he's drunk and he's knocked out, he may have gone to sleep naked, right? But he might have been laying next to his wife, and because he's knocked out, he doesn't know what's happening. He's so out, he doesn't know what's happening next to him, right? Ham comes in, right? Sees the nakedness of his father, right? You see his father naked and his mother naked. And then after he does that, he goes and tells his brothers outside. His brothers are furious. They're like, "Oh man, hey, we can't do this," right? So they go and they protect the nakedness of their father, right? That is the the view of and then from that, Canaan is born, or Canaan is the product of this act that Ham does, right? Now, against that view, right? Again, nothing is said about the wife of Noah. Nothing's actually said about the wife of Noah. We're just implying that based upon what we see in Leviticus 18, all right, and the fact that there's focus on Canaan. It could be, as it just states, right? Noah's naked, right? There is shame from being naked, right? So we head back to Genesis chapter 3, right? Or really the end of Genesis chapter 2. They were naked and unashamed. And then once they are able to notice that they are naked, they are ashamed by their nakedness, right? And so maybe there's just a cultural understanding that nakedness is bad, right? It is shameful, right? So that could be within the text too, right? And so to be seen naked by another person, or by your children, right? Could be shameful, right? And they're living in shame on a culture, right? And so that could be enough. Okay, that could be enough. And so that could be enough there, right? And then also too, it says immediately when he woke up and knew what his younger son had done, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants." Right? Well, if it is the view, right, that Canaan is the byproduct of Ham sleeping with his mother. Well, it takes 9 months for a child to be born, right? And so, Noah wouldn't be able to curse Canaan by name unless Ham knew and stated, "Hey, I slept with mom. I know she's pregnant. I know she's gonna have a boy, and when she has a boy, I'm naming him Canaan," right? So, or this could be, backdrop. It could say, "Cursed be your son. May he be a servant of servants to his brothers," right? And then they're just backfilling the name Canaan, or cursed be the child that comes from this. It comes from this, what you have done, and they're just backfilling it with Canaan, right? So that's the argument for either side of it. Go with it as you wish. Okay. Chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. The designation of Ham as the youngest son, verse 24, is peculiar, given that he is always listed after Shem and before Japheth. Possibly, for some unexplained reason, the traditional order of the names does not reflect the birth sequence of the boys. Cursed be Canaan. Noah's reaction to Ham's action is to curse Canaan, Ham's son. This outcome has clearly been anticipated in the narration, for twice previously it has been mentioned in each context, unnecessarily, that Ham is the father of Canaan, verses 18 and 22. A servant of servants shall he be. This passage was wrongly appealed to in past centuries to justify the enslavement of African people, resulting in grievous abuse, injustice, and inhumanity to people created in the image of God. Noah's curse of Canaan, which focuses on his being a servant, anticipates the judgment that will later befall the Canaanites. Cross-reference Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 to 3, and Genesis chapter 10, verses 15 to 19. This, coupled with the fact that the curse falls on Canaan alone and not on Ham's other children who settled in northern Africa, shows how illegitimate it was to use this text to justify enslaving African people. For more on the overall biblical position on slavery, see notes on 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 21, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5, Colossians chapter 3, verse 22 to 25, and 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 10. Shem, however, is given pride of place as implied by Noah's remark that Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem, Genesis chapter 9, verse 27. I don't have it today, but I think in Monday's recording, when we come back and we start chapter 12, before we start that, I think I'll try to have some research on where this idea of this curse, the curse of Canaan, being put on the African people, where that came from. So a little tease there, a little tease. Where who was the first person or people to postulate that? I'll try to find some research on that there, and to say where that came from and how that became a thing. And for, I mean, this is why it's important to have solid biblical literacy, because again, the curse, as it states, the curse is on Canaan. And as you know and understand the biblical story, and again, this is why I say the audience for this are the people of Israel as they're in the desert. Because they're in the desert, they're getting the Mosaic law, and there's all these things talking about the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan that they're supposed to go and take. And so they go back and they see in Genesis, oh, hey, Noah cursed them. This whole thing is about Canaan and the Canaanites and the land of Canaan. Has nothing to do with the other descendants of Ham. So anyone bringing this up and saying that the descendants of Ham are cursed and that they're supposed to be servants, they do not know the Bible. They do not have good biblical literacy. All right. You guys see, sometimes I get hot and bothered when it comes to certain things. Chapter 9, verse 28, the report of Noah's death continues the pattern used throughout Genesis chapter 5 to describe the total age and death of Adam and his descendants. Chapter 10, verses 1 to chapter 11, verse 9, the descendants of Noah's sons. The next main section of Genesis outlines developments after the flood, focusing on how humanity becomes divided into different nations. All right. There we go. The clans, languages, lands, and nations. Genesis chapter 10, verses 1 to 32. This entire passage sets out largely in the form of lists how the descendants of Noah's 3 sons populate different regions of the earth. Additional details of special interest are occasionally added. This geographical passage is describing a process that covered a long time as family clans migrated to particular regions. See map below. The ancestor after whom the clan or tribe is named may not have lived in the region that later bears his name. Each of the 3 main parts of this section concludes with a reference to clans, languages, and nations, verses 5, 20, and 31. Chapter 10, verse 1. These are the generations of this distinctive formula marks the start of a new section in Genesis. See note on chapter 2, verse 4. Right. So we saw the first time we saw this was in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. Then we saw it again in Genesis chapter 5, where it was the first time we saw the book. All right, this is the book of the generations. But this goes back to the normal pattern of these are the generations of that we saw earlier, and then it repeats the same way throughout the rest of Genesis. Chapter 10, verse 2 to 5. Japheth's descendants are listed first. From these, the coastland peoples spread. Verse 5. This is the only additional remark that is made. All right, so here we have a map of what's called the Table of Nations. And so now, as you get into much more like biblical scholarship and stuff like that, you start to listen to folks who are way smarter than me about what's going on in the Bible. There's often a reference to the Table of Nations. And when there's a reference to the Table of Nations, what it's meant is this list, table, quote unquote, of names of the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth in Genesis chapter 10. And so that is the table that they're referring to, and it speaks of the nations. All right, so here on this map, it says circa 2200 BC, so 2200 years before Christ, many of the people groups mentioned in Genesis chapter 10 can be identified with relative certainty. In general, the descendants of Ham settled in North Africa and the eastern Mediterranean coast. The descendants of Shem in Mesopotamia and Arabia, and the descendants of Japheth in Europe and the greater area of Asia Minor. All right. So Shem, Mesopotamia, and Arabia, and then descendants of Japheth in Europe and the greater area of Asia. Okay. Ham in Northern Africa. Okay. So they spread out, right? And so this is what the map here shows. I might have to, let me take this down a little bit so we can see the whole map, right? And it's nice and color coded, right? So the green are the descendants of Ham, right? And so it shows that they go down to Cush, Egypt, Put, all right, here. And then they stay here in this area here, which eventually becomes Israel. Yet one person goes over here off the coast of Europe. So in Europe, Nimrod goes over to Mesopotamia. He heads over there. Where's the Red Sea? Red Sea's right here. Where's this at? Southwest Arabia. Okay, I guess this is here. That's what this must be. So the Gulf of Aden. I guess that's what this is over here. So Ramah, yeah, it must be, because I know later on in the Bible it talks a lot about Ramah. Sheba, Sabbath, Havilah. Okay, yeah, that must be this area right here. Has to be. Okay, all right. And so then you have names that are outlined by, I guess, black, or descendants of Shem. All right, so you have Ur the Chaldees in here. Some other names: Aram, Asher, Elam, Pakshad, Gomer, Magag. Okay, descendants of Japheth in the red there. All right, so pretty cool map here to try to see, where people went and whatnot. And Apparently um, there's some evidence there in archaeology, I guess, to put people with these names. So it's pretty cool. This reminds me of something because we looked at a table last time when they had the table of the flood, and I spent about 10, 15 minutes, man, trying to figure out how they were able to determine what day, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever, that they had on the table. And I did some digging, and so that they just decided to start with Sunday. There is nothing in the text that says actually what day, as far as day of the week, any of the actions was on. There is day of the month, but no day of the week. So that was taking me for a spin, and I just could not figure it out. And so as I looked it up, there's nothing in the text that says day of the week. So there's a little added flair there from the ESV Study Bible scholars. All right. Here we get a a little thing here about ziggurat. So let's look at this. See what we're talking about here. What are we dealing with here? That's not. Goodness gracious. All right. Ziggurats are monumental temple towers found throughout the area of ancient Mesopotamia. They were commonly built of sun-dried mud and straw bricks, held in position with bitumen and mortar. Stairways ascended at the top of these structures, where a small temple shrine sat on the summit. The illustration below depicts the ziggurat of Nana at which was constructed during the reign of Ur-Namu, circa 2113 to 2095 BC. Its area covered 150 by 250 feet, and its height was 80 feet. It is commonly believed that this type of structure was being built in the Tower of Babel episode, Genesis 11, 1-9. The text indicates that the builders of Babel had discovered the process of making mud bricks and that they employed a bitumen for mortar, verse 3. Based on that invention, the builders decided to build a tower with its top in the heavens, verse 4. All right. So they're saying that this is probably what the structure of the Tower of Babel looked like. Probably looked like this, a ziggurat. All right, headed back to chapter 10. Okay, so let's finish the sentence. Sorry. So the note here at the end of chapter 5, Japheth's descendants are listed from the coastland peoples are listed first. From these, the coastland people spread, verse 5. This is the only additional remark that is made concerning them. It associates Japheth's descendants with the coastland regions and islands of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. All right, now to Ham's descendants. All right. Chapter 10, verse 6 to 20. Ham's descendants receive considerably more attention than those of Japheth and Shem. Among them figure many of Israel's enemies, such as the Egyptians, Babylonians, Philistines, and various Canaanite groups. Ham's immediate sons are Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. Verse 6. Cush and Put are the regions to the south and west of Egypt, respectively. Cush fathered Nimrod. Verse 8. This association may seem unusual given that Cush is linked geographically with Africa and Nimrod with Mesopotamia. Nimrod is of particular interest for several reasons. He is linked to the great cities of Babel, that is, Babylon. See note on 11:9. And Nineveh in Assyria, whose inhabitants at a later stage would descend in destructive power on the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The military might of the Assyrians and Babylonians may account for the related observations that Nimrod was a mighty man, that is, warrior, and a mighty hunter, 10:8 and 9. These descriptions, one of which is linked with irony to the expression before the Lord, 10:9, are probably to be viewed negatively. Nimrod's aggression as a person runs totally counter to what God had intended when at creation. He commissioned humanity to be his vice regents or representatives. Babel and the land of Shinar. Verse 10. These details link Nimrod with the Tower of Babel episode, see 11:2 and 9. Nimrod's kingdom is the antithesis of what God desired. The great city, chapter 10, verse 12. This probably denotes a region that included both Nineveh and Calah. See Jonah chapter 3, verse 3. The detailed list of Canaan's descendants includes cities that play a significant role in later episodes in Genesis. The specific mention of Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 10:19, provides a possible link between the actions of Ham in 9:22 and the men of Sodom in 19:4-8. The designation Canaanite is sometimes used to cover all the different groups mentioned in chapter 10, verses 15 to 19. See also 28:1. So, I mean, a lot of stuff here. And it's, that's why I'm glad we're going through the ESV Study Bibles, because reading the Bible over and over, some of these things you catch, but then, sometimes, it's useful to have a resource that draws your attention to certain things. I noticed a few things as I was reading it earlier, as I was reading the actual text, about some of the names that were in Ham's descendant list, and how those descendants, there was strife that came with those descendants. So let me actually, let's see if we can, let's see, what's this, 11? Let me go back real quick to the scriptures. Where are we at? Okay, let's go to Ham's list of descendants real quick. Okay, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. All right, so Egypt, they end up becoming slaves in Egypt. Cush, Sheba, Havilah, Sapta, Ramah, Saptica, Sheba, Dedan, Cush, father Nimrod. The beginning of his kingdom, Babylon. All right, so they get they get captured and taken over by Babylon later on, as it talked about. Once they become a kingdom, that happens. Land of Shinar. From that, he went into Assyria and built Nineveh. Right, the Assyrians, they take over the northern kingdom and they aggress the southern kingdom of Israel. Nineveh, Jonah has to go to Nineveh to preach to them, so that they will or he warns them that God's going to judge them. And as he warns them, he's mad that he has to go and preach to them, because he knows that if they repent, God's going to forgive them. He doesn't want God to forgive them because of all the pain that they're causing them. So they're there, and then counsel him from whom the Philistines came. Right. So Philistines, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and Egypt, and obviously the Canaanites, all people that they end up coming in contact with and having issues with. So, and then even these, okay. So, I guess this would be 10-19. Yeah, because these are all the Canaanites that they end up having to fight. So, yeah. Good deal. Good deal. All right. All right, here we go. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Chapter 10, verse 21 to 32. These verses list the descendants of Shem. These are the people with whom Israelites felt the most affinity. For Abraham was descended from them, from Shem. Insofar as they can be identified, many of these are Arabian tribes or kingdoms. From the outset, Shem's great-grandson Eber is selected for special attention. Verse 21, being mentioned even before Shem's own sons are named. The designation Hebrew, in the Hebrew Ibri, see chapter 14, verse 13, is derived from Eber, Hebrew Eber. By way of underlining his importance, readers are informed that he called one of his sons Peleg, which may be taken to mean division. For in his days, the earth was divided. Chapter 10, verse 25. This is probably an allusion to the Tower of Babel incident in chapter 11, verses 1 to 9. The line of Shem's descendants from Arpachshad to Peleg is repeated with additional information in chapter 11, verses 11 to 19. All right, give me a second. Let's head back real quick. I want to see. Shem also the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth. Children. Oh, okay, wow. See, little things, man. I didn't even, kind of breeze past that. I wouldn't even notice, right? So, and I think one time I tried to write this one out like I did the other genealogy, but I don't think I've actually finished it because I couldn't figure out the best system to write it out with on the computer. So, but I might try to do it again at one point. But I mean, these little things, right? So you get the sons of Japheth, the sons of Ham. Then you get a break. You look at Canaan, who follows certain people, and then to Shem, also the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth. Children were born to the sons of Shem. Right? It's it's good stuff, man. Within these genealogies, it's good stuff. We just have to learn to be able to read them take our time, slow it down a little bit, maybe spend a day or two just looking at the genealogy, write it out, see where it takes a pause, see what stands out, see where there's deviation from the formula, and then that might tell you something important's happening. So yeah, pretty cool there. Pretty cool. All right, let's head back. Chapter 11, verses 1 to 9. The Tower of Babel. This episode is significantly more important than its length suggests. It presents a unified humanity using all its resources to establish a city that is the antithesis of what God intended when he created the world. The tower is a symbol of human autonomy, and the city builders see themselves as determining and establishing their own destiny. Without any reference to the Lord. The tower story may also be a polemic against Mesopotamian mythology. Eridu Genesis, a fragmentary text found at Nippur, and Nineveh, describes the goddess Nintur's calling for humanity to build cities and to congregate in one place. Her desire, according to this text, is that humans be sedentary and not nomadic. Yahweh demands just the opposite, so that the earth would become populated. Right? So we see how this story, like the others, is shown as an argument against other stories that are out there. Okay. The opening description of the whole earth having one language indicates that the present episode is not placed chronologically after the events narrated in chapter 10, which specifically mention nations and languages. This incident, however, may have occurred during the broad period covered in chapter 10, especially if it is linked to the naming of Peleg in chapter 10, verse 25. See note on 10:21-32, which we just read. This is important because as we discussed earlier when we went through the introduction to the book of Genesis, right? It talked about the book of Genesis being an anthology in itself, right? So it itself is a library of different stories, and so it it's constructed in a particular way. And so the way Moses has constructed it, or maybe certain redactors or whoever put the final construction together, has constructed it to where this story is placed here, right? So there was a linkage to Noah and finishing up the Noah story by giving his descendants, his children, and then their descendants, right? But then we get this story, which has to happen prior to what's happening in chapter 10, right? And so sometimes, and this is why you get the critical scholarship that came out of Germany in the in the 1800s, the 19th century, saying, hey, there must have been multiple people working on this because it's out of order, it's talking about different things, right? And all that, right? However, we can let the construction stand as it is and understand that it is doing certain things, right? And as we let it do the things that it is doing, and where it is coming out, going back in, coming out, going back in. I mean, we even have this in in certain movies or TV series that we watch, right? Where the story is going along and then there's a flashback. The story is going along and it stops and pauses and does something else, right? We have that. And so we can allow Genesis to do the same thing. Right? Chapter 11, verses 2-4. Come, let us build ourselves a city, and let us make a name for ourselves. Right? The Babel enterprise is all about human independence and self-sufficiency apart from God. The builders believe that they have no need of God. Their technology and social unity give them confidence in their own ability. And they have high aspirations, constructing a tower with its top in the heavens. Contrary to God's plan that people should fill the earth, the city building project is designated to prevent the population from being dispersed over the face of the whole earth by showing God's continued interest in his creatures. This episode provides the setting for the call of Abram out of this very region to be the vehicle of blessing to the whole world. There is so much to say here. And as I spoke about on day one, how there's much that I want to discuss, but I feel like I need to go through, I need to have, before I discuss the content that I want to discuss, there needs to be a sufficient biblical knowledge before I can discuss those things, right? However, just take what we just read, right? And just and look and read, and as we go through the study notes regarding this particular passage, and then think about our current society and the ideas of humanism, and ask yourself, for those of you who call yourselves Christians, ask yourself, are the ideas of humanism compatible with the Bible? This idea of human independence and self-sufficiency and being your authentic self, and what we can accomplish when we all come together. All I'm saying, forewarning, for those of you who do end up completing this project and end up making it with me all the way through through the Bible, through this ESV Study Bible in a year. If you make it through, there's no way that you're going to make it all the way through and continue to see our society the same. You're going to constantly see how what is accepted truth and the accepted morality of our current society, you're going to say repeatedly, man, this does not line up with Scripture. Repeatedly. And once you see that, you're going to have a choice to make. Which one are you going to go with? Because you can't go with both. You're going to have to decide. So we have here. All right. So we move on to the next note. Chapter 11, verses 5 to 8. With irony, the narrator points out that it is necessary for the Lord to come down in order to see the city and the tower. Verse 5, acknowledging the potential danger of a unified, self-confident humanity. I mean, think about that. What in our society, when we say that there's anything wrong, there's danger of a unified, self-confident humanity? Would we say that that is wrong? We would not. However, this story is put here, and God says there's something wrong with it. Verse 6, God intervenes by confusing their language so that they cannot understand one another. This has the desired effect of dispersing the people throughout the world. Verses 8 to 9. This verse links the name of the city, Babel, Hebrew, Babel, with the verb balal, which means to confuse, to mix, to mingle. But Babel is also the name used in the Old Testament for the city of Babylon. As a city, Babylon symbolizes humanity's ambition to dethrone God and make the earth its own. See Revelation chapter 17, verse 18. There's so much here. There's so much here. I'll say this. If you want to know, like, read this story, okay? It's only 9 verses. Read this story and look at it, and then go watch the movie Moana 2. I should do this. First, go watch the movie Moana 2. Then read the story. Then watch the movie again. And as you watch it, see if before you even got involved with this, if you would have thought anything was wrong with the movie. And then read this and really study the story, and then go back and watch the movie. And see if you can, if you can get through it without, pulling your hair out. Because I would say Moana 2 is very indicative of and what is what message is pushed, and I wouldn't say pushed, what message is believed by the creators of the story, and what is evident, as far as what is shown there. So that story compared to this story, how do they compare? What would the creator of the story of the Tower of Babel, what would he say? What would Moses say? And as we understand, this is God's word. God has inspired this to be written this way. What would he say about the movie Moana 2? Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. Okay, we got another little table here. All right. So we have 3 columns, right? Action, purpose, desire. They build a city. That's the action. The purpose, in order not to be dispersed over the face of the earth. The desire, they desire security. The action, they build a tower with its top to the heavens. The purpose, in order to make a name for themselves. They want praise. So they want security and praise. What does God have to say about it? He thought, hey, I got to come down and break this party up. Shem's descendants. Chapter 11, verse 10 to 26. Shem's descendants. Resembling the list of Adam's descendants in chapter 5, verses 3 to 31, the present linear genealogy traces Noah's line through Shem toward Terah, the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. While the pattern is almost identical to that used in chapter 5, the final element, thus all the days of A were Z years, and he died, is missing. Also, unlike chapter 5, no additional information is inserted. Consequently, the list moves swiftly from Shem to Terah. While the periods mentioned are still unusually long, they gradually become somewhat shorter. The length of time during which these men live is much shorter than is recorded for men living before the flood. Cross-reference chapter 5, verses 1 to 32. This is similar to the pattern found in a clay tablet from the Mesopotamian city of Uruk, called the Sumerian King List. See note on chapter 5, verses 1 to 32. It was inscribed by a scribe during the reign of King Utuk-Hagel. That's my best try at that, Utuk-Hagel. About 2100 BC. It tells of kings who reigned for extremely long times. A flood then came, and subsequent kings ruled for vastly shorter times. Chapter 11, verse 26. The regular pattern of the genealogy is broken with the naming of Terah's 3 sons. Before this, only the son through whom the linear genealogy is traced is specifically named in each generation. Abram comes first in the list because the ongoing family line is traced through him. Chapter 11, verse 27 to chapter 50, verse 26, patriarchal history. The narrative now moves from the general survey of humanity to the specific family from which Israel comes. The narrative style becomes severely matter of fact. The narrator devotes much more time to describing the lives of the characters, whereas chapters 1 through 11 covers many generations in only 11 chapters. The patriarchal history deals with only 4 generations in 39 chapters. It begins with Abraham and goes on to his son Isaac, and Isaac's 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. The final section focuses on Jacob's sons, especially Joseph. Here, the specifics of being Israel are made clear. The land, the people, the blessing, and the calling. The Sinai or Mosaic covenant, which the first audience of these chapters receives, will provide the setting in which Israel is to put these patriarchal promises into practice. Throughout these chapters, the readers will see how God has preserved the members of his chosen family, whose calling it is to walk with him, to be the head waiters, the head waiters of a, is that a head waters or head waiters? Head waters of a special people, and to be the channel by which blessing comes into the world. Okay. Give me 1 second here. I've seen that word a bunch of times and I still don't know how to say it. Okay, headwater. So to be the headwaters of a special people and to be the channel by which blessing comes into the entire world. Okay. All right, before we get there, one thing I want to discuss real quick before we move on and finish this up. One thing that was brought to my attention, and I talked about Dr. Michael Heiser, I think on day 1, and I've learned a lot from him. The late Dr. Michael Heiser, who has passed away. I think he passed away in 2025, maybe in 2024. But great gift to the body of Christ. But something that he helped to bring to my attention is that within the biblical mind, the mind of the writers of the Bible, right, and their different the different writings that they write, right, what is in their mind about, if you ask a Christian today, like, what's wrong with the world? When did things go wrong in the world, right? Most of the time they'll point to Genesis chapter 3, right, the fall, right, and that'll be it. But for the mind of the biblical writers, right, the fall is a part of what's wrong with the world, right? But is it the fall, Genesis chapter 6, with the intermingling between the sons of God and the daughters of men, whoever that may be, whether it be, and for him, he says it is angels. But, like I said, it's up for debate. I think he's correct in saying that it is angels, but Whatever it may be. So that event, right, which has more destruction that comes with it, and then this Tower of Babel incident. It is those three events that give an understanding of, hey, when we look and we see all that is wrong around us, why is that? And there's consistent pointing back to those events. All right. And so, as we discussed before, I think on our prep day, or maybe when we were reading the introduction to Genesis, the book of Genesis sets up, it's like an introduction for the rest of the Pentateuch, but also to all the rest of the Old Testament, really the rest of the Bible, right? And so understanding those first 11 chapters, understanding, all 50 chapters here, eventually helps to understand what unfolds throughout the rest of the Bible. And so, just wanted to bring that to you guys' attention. And maybe we can see that unfold as we go through the ESV Study Bible throughout the rest of the year. All right, chapter 11, verse 27 to chapter 25, verse 18. Terah's descendants. A new heading identified by the expression, these are the generations of, introduces the next main section of Genesis. See note on 2:4. These chapters focus on the immediate family. The immediate family of Terah. Special attention is given to Abram because the unique family line of Genesis is continued through him. Chapter 11, verses 27 to 32. A brief introduction to Terah's family. Various details pertinent to understanding the subsequent narrative are given. The death of Lot's father, Haran, verse 28. The relocation of the family from southern to northern Mesopotamia, verse 31. And the ability of Abram's wife, and the inability of Abram's wife to have children, verse 30. Chapter 11, verse 27. Abram will later have his name changed to Abraham, right? So for those of you who are getting to this part of the scripture for the first time, welcome. And you get this name Abram, right? But you might be familiar with the name of Abraham, right? Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. Right? So you've probably heard the name Abraham before, but did not know that at first his name was Abram. And then later on in the story, it gets changed to Abraham. Chapter 11, verse 28, Ur of the Chaldeans is unquestionably the ancient city in southern Babylon that the remains of which are located in Tel El Mukayyar in modern Iraq. See illustration on page 71. Archaeological investigations by Leonard Woolley from 1922 to 1934 uncovered evidence of a highly developed urban culture in the time of Abram, a culture that developed around 2000 BC. The term Chaldeans probably dates from the period 1000 to 500 BC and has been added to distinguish this from similarly named cities in northern Mesopotamia. See introduction, author title, and date. Chaldeans refers to the Chaldu people who settled in southern Babylonia from about 1200 BC onward. So what the scholars of the ESV Study Bible believe, and I'm in line with them, is that not that the book of Genesis was written late, right? Around 1500 BC. However, that it was written early, and most of it was compiled or written by Moses, right? So this would have been between 1500 and 1300 BC, or 1200, but around that time, depending on what time you date the Exodus. So it would have been written there, right? But we get certain names of places that are not named that, during that time. And the question is, well, how those names get into the text? And the idea is that, hey, probably as the text has been written down and passed on, and you have different scribes who are writing down the text and passing it on, as they do so, to give clarification of certain cities and whatnot, or places. They change the name, or add to the name, so that there's clarification for the readers of their time, right? And so this is what people inside of biblical scholarship would call redactors, right? Or scribes. So as they are writing things, they're writing out the story, they're copying it, making a copy. They're like, oh, hey, people here might confuse this for another right? So we'll say of the Chaldeans. Chapter 11, verse 29. The name Sarai is later changed to Sarah. See chapter 17, verse 15. Sarai's barrenness is an obvious barrier to the continuation of Abram's family line. The initial barrenness of the patriarch's wives is a recurring motif in Genesis. See chapter 25, verse 21, and 29, verse 31. We'll get there next week. Chapter 11, verse 31, verses 31 to 32. According to the Kolepti text, Koltepe text from the 19th century BC, text composed by Assyrian traders who clearly understood such matters. Haran was an important crossroads and commercial center in the ancient Near East. All right, so Haran was an important place, right? And so 19th century, right, which would be 1800 BC, right? So you get Haran as an important place in 1800, right? So you get the brother of Abram as Haran, and this is probably significant because this lends to either that name was popular at the time, right? So around 2000, or became popular over there. So, and this is, I would say, this is consistent with one of the ways of pushing the dates of the text further back instead of as newer, but as more ancient, because they start to get the names correct of older times, right? So the personal names, so the names of places, as we saw with the Chaldeans, the places themselves might have names of newer times, but the names of people will be the names of older times, right? And so that would lend credence to, hey, this, there's no, Google to, hey, what were the names of people in Babylon in 1800 BC? So this lends credence to at least the story itself, is from that time. Although Terah's ambition is to move his family from to Canaan, they do not complete the journey, but settle in northern Mesopotamia at Haran. The location in Turkey is now called Eskeharan, Old Haran. The spelling of the town name Haran in Hebrew is quite distinct from the name of Terah's third son. This is the Bible's first reference to the land of Canaan. But the Ebla archives found in northern Syria in the 1970s contain clay tablets dating to circa 2300 BC. They make mention of certain geographical places found in Scripture, such as Sodom and Zeboim, two cities in the episode of the War of the Kings, Genesis 14, verses 1 to 16. In addition, the first time the name Canaan is used in extra biblical literature is at Ebla, in tablets that predate the biblical writings by centuries. Right. So, this gives credence to, hey, this is at least the names of these places are real, right? So even if someone says, "Oh, this whole thing is made up," hey, look, at least the names of the places are real, right? So it starts to lend towards, hey, maybe what Moses is writing here is real as well. Chapter 11, verse 32. The way of completing this short introduction to Terah's family. By way of completing this short introduction to Terah's family, the narrative records his death at age 205. If Abram was born when Terah was 70 years old, see verse 26, and if Abram was 75 years old when he departed for Canaan, see 12:4, then Terah died 60 years after Abram's departure. 70 plus 75 plus 60 equals 205. In Acts chapter 7, verse 4, however, Stephen says that Abram left Haran after the death of Terah. A simple way to resolve the chronological difficulty is to suppose that Stephen was following an alternative text represented today in the Samaritan Pentateuch, which says that Terah died at the age of 145. Let me see something. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Stephen says that Abram left Haran after the death of Terah. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred." When he departed for Canaan, 12:4. And I will bless you and make your name great. We're going to get to chapter 12 tomorrow. Let me pull it up real quick though, because I want to see there's another way to try to reconcile this. All right, so let's go to this is 12. I don't know why this starts to take so long. Okay. So okay. All right. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who honors you, I will who dishonors you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother. Okay. And then let's see, Acts chapter 7. Did it say verse 4? Acts chapter 7, verse 4. All right. Let's try to see if I can give you brothers. All right. So the high priest said, "Are these things so?" And Stephen said, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, 'Go out from your land and from your kindred, and go into the land that I will show you.' Then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living." Compared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia. Um, let's see this up. (11-12). Excellent. All right, we're doing some on the fly, some live reading of the text to try to see if we can figure some things out. So the way that the ESV Study Bible has tried to handle this supposed contradiction, right? And I'm going to say supposed, and it talked about it in the introduction that it would try to help to give solutions to the contradictions. And so we are going to try to see if we're going to go with their solution, or if we can find a different solution ourselves. All right. So the contradiction is that when so in Genesis, Moses writes, "So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed." Right. So if we do that, he was born when Terah was 70, right? Plus 75. Okay, that equals 145. That does not equal 205, right? You need 60 more years in order to equal 205, right? So, hey, the Bible has contradictions, not the word of God, not divine, right? So we have to figure out how can we square this circle, all right? So if we go with here, actually, let's do this. Let's go this to verse 5. 11 through 11, 27. Oh, goodness gracious. Messed it up. 11, 27. Just so we can see them clear. All right. So when Stephen starts to speak, he says, "The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia." All right. So let's see if we see that in the text. Terah took Abraham, his son, and went from Ur the Chaldeans, right? So Ur the Chaldeans, as we talked about in the when we were reading the ESV Study Bible notes, right? Ur the Chaldeans is in southern Mesopotamia. Okay, so they left southern Mesopotamia, right? He was in Mesopotamia to go to the land of Canaan. All right, so they're trying to go to the land of Canaan, where they are now. All right, before they lived in Haran, right? So Stephen is saying that God appeared to Abraham, right? God appeared to Abraham, right? But within the text, we don't see God appearing to Abraham, or the text in Genesis does not tell us that God appeared to Abraham at this time, right? Or when or where he is, right? So, because if we read it, you say, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing and will bless those who bless you. And him who dishonors you, I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. All right, so let's just focus on this part. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you. Says some stuff. Then the movement goes here. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Now, here what it sounds like is that God is speaking to him in Haran, not in Mesopotamia, right? So, because it says, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land. And so here it says Abraham went as the Lord had told him. So if he goes as the Lord has told him, then that means that he's leaving from the country, he's leaving his kindred and his father's house, right? So Abraham's leaving, then it says Lot went with him, right? Now, if Stephen is correct, okay, and he's saying that God appeared to Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, when he was in Ur of the Chaldeans, right? And that means that the moving, right? Maybe Abram started to move, right? And Terah was like, well, hey, if you going, we going. But then Terah maybe urged him to say, hey, come on, let's stop here. So then he stops and then continues to go, right? Maybe that's what happens. Okay. But we don't get that in the text. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but we don't get that in the text. And so by that, what the ESV Study Bible gives us, because I would say one way that I was thinking about reconciling this is that what Stephen is talking about is basically after we are told that Terah died, Abraham goes, right? So like after, in the sense of after this part of the story, right? Like, hey, we're in synagogue every day. This part of the story is read, and then after that, the part of the story is read when Abraham leaves. So not in order of what actually happens in real life, but in order of how the story is told, right? Is how I was going to reconcile it, right? Man, I got different ads and stuff coming up, man. What is going on? I might need to get Bible Gateway Plus, man. You know, we're gonna keep doing this, man. We got all these ads and things going on here. So that's how I was gonna reconcile it, right? But this notion here that God appeared to Abraham in Mesopotamia, to me, that presents a problem for just saying like, oh, what he's talking about is when you know, after the part of when it says that Terah dies, then we're told that Abraham leaves, right? So, and or I hope that makes sense. Basically saying, right, not chronologically as in Abraham left after Terah died at 205, but Abraham left after we are told in the story, right, that basically saying that this part of the story is told, and then this part of the story is told. Like that's the chronology. That's what I was trying to get at. And for those who are listening and not watching, I was pointing to literally the text, right? Hey, this paragraph comes before that paragraph, is what I was trying to say. All right. But there's more information in here with what Stephen is saying than what is within this text. And so what the scholars of the ESV Study Bible are saying is the way to understand, hey, why he might be saying that is that there is another version of the Pentateuch that is out there, right? And that Stephen might be speaking about what was in the Samaritan Pentateuch, right? In the Samaritan version of the Genesis story. Okay. And then there you get Terah dying at the age of 145, not at age 205, right? And so that's what he could be referring to. And in that version, you also could probably, not probably, but maybe that's where he's getting that God came to Abraham while they were still in Mesopotamia. Okay, so that concludes our study notes for chapter 9 to chapter 11. So tomorrow is Sunday, so the 4th, and that is our rest day. I probably will post something, just like a small, like 10-minute something that will be for our rest. But now we're going to get into our article for the evening. All right. So, okay. I'm glad I put this on here because one thing I wanted to do. So this is another thing that's in the back of the book, another resource, and it talks about the history of salvation in the Old Testament, preparing the way for Christ. So what I want to do is, and I didn't realize this was there until I started going through the articles today to try to figure out what I was going to read for today. And so what it has, though, is because we went over in the overview of the Bible, we talked, it gave a history of salvation and went over that on Prep Day 2. Okay. And it talks about salvation through the scriptures. Right. But what this resource has is it goes verse by verse and it discusses and it gives notes about how salvation is unfolding verse by verse. And I think it's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, after we do the reading for the day, I'll try to remember to make sure to put this in there to where I read each verse or this, what they write here for each verse from that day's reading, right? So I'll go back and do verse, chapter 1, verse 1, all the way through to 11 today. But from now on, it'd be whatever that day's reading is. Let me just read this little explanation they have here. Again, see overview of the Bible, pages 23 to 26, which we read on day 2. So if you want to listen to it again, that was on Prep Day 2. Sorry, Prep Day 2, or Prep 2, if you are watching on YouTube. For a fuller explanation of the history of salvation, the notes in this feature are identified by single verses only for easy cross-reference in the main study notes on Bible text pages. See, however, many of these notes apply to more than just one verse by which they are identified. Directions for the reader to see note on another verse refer only to notes within this feature, not to the main study notes on Bible text pages. All right, so Genesis. After God creates the world, uh, of fruitfulness and blessing, Adam's fall disrupts the harmony. God proposes to renew fruitfulness and blessing through the offspring of the woman. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Christ is the ultimate offspring, Galatians chapter 3, verse 16, who brings climactic victory, Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14 to 15. Genesis traces the beginning of a line of godly offspring through Seth, Enoch, Noah, and then God's choice of Abraham and his offspring. You see the relevant verses there. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. God's act of creation is the foundation for the entire biblical history. A considerable number of passages refer back to creation. You see them here. All the rest of the Bible depends indirectly on it. Chapter 1, verse 3, God speaks and it is done. The centrality of the word of God is in the act of creation, is in the acts of creation, anticipates the deeper truth given in John 1:1, that the second person of the Trinity is the Word. Chapter 1, verse 3, God created physical light. The Bible also says that God is light in a moral and spiritual sense. 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. By God's design, the physical aspects of creation can serve as vehicles for developing themes about God and his salvation. Jesus is the light of the world. John chapter 8, verse 12. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. The divine Son is the image of the invisible God. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. Man was created in a way that reflects the imaging relation among the persons of the Trinity. The redemption of man from the fall and sin includes recreation. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. His being created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness in the image of Christ. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 24. Chapter 1, verse 28. God created a permanent order of creation, but he also intended a development in which man would play a central role. Because Adam failed and fell into sin, Christ came as the last Adam to achieve dominion. See the relevant verses there. For those of you listening, whenever I say see the relevant verses, that's you're not watching. Maybe go back and if you want to know what verses they are, you can go back and pause and or go back a few seconds and look at the actual video. And I only say that see the relevant verses if there are a lot of verses, and me reading them will kind of break up the actual reading. So even though I'm breaking up the reading right now, but just as I go along, if I say see relevant verses, that means that there's multiple ones there, and it will slow us down. Okay, all right. Chapter 1, verse 31. Sin is a later intrusion into an originally good creation. It is not inherent in the world, and so it can be completely removed when God achieves his purposes in the consummation. Revelation chapter 22, verse 3-5. Chapter 2, verse 2. God rested from his works of creation, but he continues to work in providence and after sin enters in redemption. See John chapter 5, verse 15. As human beings, we look forward to entering into God's consummation rest. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 4, and chapters 9-11. Chapter 2, verse 3. Man imitates the pattern of God's work and rests in the Sabbath cycle of days. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8-11, and years. Leviticus chapter 25. The Sabbath points forward to the rest that Christ achieved with his resurrection and ascension. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 12-13. And he will be fully manifested in the consummation. Revelation chapter 22, verse 5. Chapter 2, verse 7, God has life in himself and impacts life to his creatures. the impartation of physical life anticipates the impartation of spiritual life. See the relevant verses. Life is in the Son. See the relevant verses. And comes to us through the Spirit. John chapter 3, verse 5. Chapter 2, verse 8. The Garden of Eden in paradise reminds us of what we have lost. Joel chapter 2, verse 3. But also of what will yet be renewed in the world to come. Isaiah chapter 51, verse 3, and Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 to 3. After the fall, the tree of life was barred to man, chapter 3, verse 24. But God promises fruitfulness to those who know him, Psalm chapter 1, verse 3. And to those who obtain wisdom, chapter 3, verse 318. Eternal life is obtained in Christ, John chapter 5, verse 24. And free access to the tree of life reappears in the consummation, Revelation chapter 22, verse 2. Divorce is a deviation, chapter 2, verse 24. Divorce is a deviation from God's design in creation, Matthew chapter 19, verse 4. The marriage relationship anticipates the relation of Christ to the church, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 to 33. See overview of the Bible, pages 23 to 26, concerning Christ as the last Adam. Chapter 3, verse 1. Later scripture indicates that Satan worked through the serpent. Isaiah chapter 27, verse 1, and Revelation chapter 12, verse 9. He was defeated by Christ's work on the cross, Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, and will be utterly destroyed in the events leading to the consummation, Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 to 10. Chapter 3, verse 4. Throughout history, Satan is engaged in deceiving, chapter 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 9 and 12, Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, and casting doubt on the word of God. When tempted by Satan, Christ rejected his lies, Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 to 11. In spite of Satan's attacks, the word of God will stand forever. See the relevant verses. Chapter 3, verse 8. God appears and judges Adam and Eve, anticipating the final day of judgment in Christ, John chapter 5, verse 22. Because of the sacrificial work of Christ, judgment can be tempered with mercy on those who belong to Christ. Chapter 3, verse 15. The offspring of the woman who inflicts decisive defeat on the serpent is Christ, Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14. But earlier in time within the Old Testament, there are partial defeats through people who prefigure Christ and foreshadow the final conflict. When Christ opens the way to eternal life, chapter 3, verse 24. When Christ opens the way to eternal life, the barring of the way to life is removed. See the relevant verses. Chapter 4, verse 26. The line of Seth appears to be a more godly line, corresponding to the promise of the offspring of the woman. Chapter 3, verse 15. While Cain and his descendants correspond to the offspring of the serpent, the line of Seth ultimately leads to Christ. Luke chapter 3, verse 38. Chapter 5, verse 5. Death is a repeated grim occurrence, reminding us of the reality of the curse. Chapter 2, verse 17, and chapter 3, verse 19. And the need for God to, in mercy, to provide a final remedy for death through Christ. See the relevant verses. Chapter 5, verse 24. Enoch's walk with God makes him an early example of faith. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 5 to 6. And his being taken by God without dying anticipates the eternal resurrection of life that Christ gives. Romans chapter 8, verse 11. Chapter 6, verse 9. For Noah's faith, see Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7. Noah, by his righteousness, saved not only himself, but his family, prefiguring the righteousness of Christ by which Christ saved his spiritual family. Chapter 6, verse 18. God promises in a covenant, see overview of the Bible, pages 23 to 26, to save Noah, prefiguring the new covenant in Christ by which we receive eternal salvation. See the relevant verses. Chapter 7:23. The flood brought a whole world to an end. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 and chapter 3, verse 6. It prefigures the final judgment in which the present heavens and earth and which ends the present heaven and earth and brings a new world. Revelation chapter 21, verse 1. God preserves those who belong to Christ, the final Noah. Chapter 8, verse 13. The emerging of a new world prefigures the creation of the new heaven and the new earth. See the relevant verses. Chapter 9, verse 7. God repeats the command given to man in chapter 1, verse 28. Noah is a new head or representative for humanity, prefiguring Christ, who will be the final head of the new humanity. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 45 to 48. All those descending from Noah are privileged for his sake. Chapter 9, verse 11. In a covenant, God guarantees to all mankind blessings that come through Noah. He shows mercy based on sacrifice. Chapter 8, verse 21, pointing forward ultimately to the mercy that comes through the sacrifice of Christ. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 12. Chapter 10, verse 32. All the nations of the world are encompassed in the plan of God. He chooses Abram alone. Chapter 10, verses 1 to 12. Chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. But eventually, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Chapter 18, verse 18. See the relevant verses. And then finally, chapter 11, verse 4. Babel and later Babylon, Revelation chapter 17 to 18, is the quintessential worldly city where man tries to exalt himself to the position of a god. It contrasts with the holy city of God's people, whose name is made great, not through their prideful self-exaltation, but by the power of God. Genesis chapter 12, verse 2, and Revelation chapter 21, verse 2. All righty. We'll get to the rest of that tomorrow, or a few of those tomorrow. But now we're getting to this article on the original languages of the Bible. And again, the reason why I wanted to do, there are different ones that I could have started with. The reason why I wanted to do this is because we were having a conversation about the original languages in Hebrew and why we have certain translations and why certain translation decisions have to be made and whatnot. And so we'll see what they go through here. And then we'll have a conversation trying to correct a mistake that I made. I think on prep day 2, it might have been on prep day 1, or sorry, on prep on day 1 of the actual reading. So can't remember when I made that mistake. But we'll talk about it. All right. So the original languages of the Bible: Hebrew and Aramaic, and how they work. Introduction. The main language of the Old Testament is classical Hebrew, but some parts are in Aramaic. Ezra chapter 4, verse 76, verse 7 to chapter 6, verse 18, and then chapter 7, verse 12 to verse 26. Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 11, and Daniel chapter 2, verses 4 to 7. Daniel chapter 2, verse 4 to chapter 7, verse 28. 2 words of Aramaic also occur in the place name Jagar Sahadutha in Genesis chapter 31, verse 47. The form of Hebrew found in the Bible was probably spoken from as early as 1500 BC to sometime after 400 BC. Although Aramaic, the official international language of the Assyrian Babylonian, and Persian empires came increasingly into daily use among Jews, many Jews, at least in the Jerusalem area, continued to use a form of Hebrew, which later developed into Mishnaic Hebrew, the language of the Mishnah. Hebrew documents with varying degrees of similarity to biblical Hebrew have been found at Qumran and in the desert of Judah, with dates from the 2nd century BC to the 2nd century AD. Over the past few days, there's been reference to Qumran before. If you look up the Dead Sea Scrolls, well, let me just tell the story for a second. So in either 1947 or 1948, the story goes that there's a young Arabian man, maybe a boy, that is playing out in the desert, throwing rocks, throws rocks into a cave, and shatters a pot, and goes in to try to see what he shattered, finds a bunch of papers and scrolls in there, and they were found in the cave of Qumran. And from there, you get a lot of scrolls and manuscripts of different writings, but within those writings were copies of the Old Testament. And those copies that were found there date back to about 250 BC. And that was significant because before then, the earliest copies of the biblical text that we had were from 900 AD. And finding those copies from 250 BC, that helped to solidify the veracity of the texts that were in the hands of people in 1948. And there's all these, conspiracies about the Bible changing over time and whatnot. We've talked about, certain things here and there, redactions, and certain things added by scribes. But as the Bible as a whole, as far as its meaning and whatnot, and things being taken out and whatnot, if that would have happened, especially this speculation that is what happened at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. If that did happen, and there was a gap between our earliest manuscripts in 900 and these new manuscripts that were found that dated back to 250 BC, that, we should have seen a change in the text, major changes in the text between that time. But we did not. There became more confidence in the Bibles that were had in 1948. If I kept reading, it would have said something about it. But there would have been more confidence in the Bibles because, oh snap, hey, what we have now is there's no change or major changes between 250 BC and 900 AD. All right, so let me keep reading. So that's the significance of Qumran, why that name keeps getting brought up. The synagogues in Palestine retained the use of Hebrew as a sacred language. Modern Hebrew, which was developed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, is based on the earlier forms of Hebrew and is one of the official languages of the modern state of Israel, founded in 1948. Oh, okay, that's what 1948 was there. Okay. Both Hebrew and Aramaic are part of the wider family of languages that since 1781 have been labeled Semitic, name derived from that of Noah's son Shem. However, languages from this group were also spoken by some peoples, such as the Amorites, Babylonians, and Canaanites, that Genesis does not record as being descended from Shem. Semitic languages. While there are many Semitic languages, they can generally be organized according to the three regions where they were spoken. First, East Semitic, Mesopotamia, including Old Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian. Number two, Southwest Semitic parts of northeastern Africa, including North Arabic, the language of the Quran, and Ethiopian. And number three, Northwest Semitic, Syro-Palestine, including Amoritic and Ugaritic, along with Hebrew, Phoenician, Moabite, the Canaanite branch, and Aramaic and Syriac, the Aramaic branch. When considered together, the Semitic languages have a longer continuous history of being written than almost any other group. Alphabet. Hebrew, Aramaic, and some neighboring Semitic languages share an alphabet of 22 consonant letters only, 23 if the sin and shin are counted separately, and are read from right to left. So they're read this way. If you can follow my cursor, you start on this side and go the other way. Well, we read from left to right. The shape and order of these Hebrew characters had been distilled by the second millennium BC, before the time of Moses and the writing of the Old Testament. This alphabet was then passed by way of the Phoenicians to the Greeks, while the Hebrew and Aramaic forms of the script began to diverge. The form of Hebrew script generally used until at least the Babylonian exile, and still found in some Dead Sea Scrolls, is known as the Paleo-Hebrew script. Some of its letters still resemble their equivalents in the Greek alphabet. During the rule of the Persians, 539 to 322 BC, to 332 BC, the square Aramaic or Assyrian script was adopted for writing Hebrew, with the result that the forms of letters originally used for Aramaic are now almost universally associated in people's minds with Hebrew. See chart on page 2596. The alphabet itself has had an effect on the form of certain texts in the Old Testament. A number of the Psalms, Psalm 9, 10, 25, 34, 37, 111, 112, 119, and 145 are arranged as types of acrostic poems composed around the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, as are the first four chapters of Lamentations. See Introduction to Lamentations, literary features. This word, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm going to butcher it. But here we go. Matres lectionis. In order to give further precision to pronunciation of words and to clarify ambiguities between words that share the same consonants, three of the consonant letters came to be used to represent vowels. The letter H represented A or E, W represented O or U, and Y, known by this, represented E or I. If you're listening, it might be good to actually to look at the screen while you listen, because they have like the actual Hebrew letters in here, and because I don't know Hebrew, right, I can't tell you what those actual letters are, but it's next to the where did we get these letters from? Latin, whatever. Our letters is standing next to that. So what it's associated with it. So that's why I say it's probably good to look at the screen to see what these letters are. All right. So the Y, O or U, and Y represented E or I. In inscriptions from biblical times, these matres lectiones, Latin for mothers of reading, i.e., vowel letters, were rare before the exile, and it is therefore often held that pre-exilic biblical writings that display extensive use of matres lectiones had these letters added after the time of composition to help readers understand the words properly. It is still the case, however, that earlier texts, such as the Pentateuch, are more sparing in the use of these than, for example, post-exilic writings such as the books of Chronicles. Roots. Semitic words are generally based on so-called roots consisting of 3 consonants. Just before I continue, this is very interesting stuff here, and this probably helps with the dating of the text. And then you might, this is probably too how there might be some controversy on the dates, right? There's the presence of certain vowels within certain texts that we would think are older. Some people might try to date the book later, right? But the ESV Study Bible here is trying to give us a reason why that might be, right? These vowels might have been added in as scribes copied down scrolls. All right, roots. Semitic words are generally based on so-called roots consisting of 3 consonants. Vowels and a limited range of other consonants are arranged around these roots to produce words. Consider the following Hebrew words: Melech, king; Melka, queen; Mamlaka, kingdom; Malik, he reigned; Malkut, reign. The constant element in all of these words is the consonant sequence MLK, which is associated with the royal rule. Sometimes a particular word may occur only once in the whole Old Testament, and the question naturally arises as to how its meaning is known. If, however, there are other words from the same root, its meaning can be identified in relation to them, with due consideration given also to its context. All right, and for those of you who are listening but not looking at the video, we have here a table of the letters there, right? And so there's the Hebrew name. So we have the table that has 5 columns, and on the column all the way to the left, there's the Hebrew name, and it's spelled so that we can, there's the Anglophile spelling, right? So that we can read it in English, the Aleph, right? Then in the next column, there's the square Assyrian or Aramaic script, right? Which is the newer script, right? So you have the Aleph, and it has what it looks like in the Assyrian script. So this is the later script. There's the Paleo-Hebrew form, which is the older one, and how that looks. And then there's one that shows the next column has sound. So I guess it's what it would sound like to us. A glottal stop is what it says. I don't know what that means. Traditional transliteration, it has here an apostrophe. What is a glottal stop? I don't know what that is, right? Then you have the Bet and how it looks in the Assyrian script, how it looks in the Paleo-Hebrew form, and it makes the sound of B. Okay. So, yeah. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right. So you can see all the letters there and what they look like and how they look very different. The Assyrian form and the Paleo-Hebrew form are very different. Yes. Very, I mean, this Semic, I mean, one looks like a, you know, an O with a little curve, and then the other looks like, a line going up and then three crosses going up. I mean, it's not look the same at all. So I don't know how they got that. The sin and the shin, those look similar, and the Paleo Hebrew is a W. But yeah, so you have it there. Pretty cool. All right, here's the description under it. The transliteration style of Hebrew characters followed in this study Bible has been somewhat simplified from the more precise traditional transliteration depicted in this chart. See transliteration charts on pages 2597 and 2599. Masoretic pointing. The Old Testament writings were produced using consonants only. Pronunciation was possible by adding vowel sounds to the consonantal words, and thus the particular vocalization and accentuation of biblical Hebrew was understood orally. And that's how you say it, orally, and was therefore taught and memorized and passed down to each successive generation orally through the Jewish schools and synagogues. Cross-reference the anecdote and in Babylonian Talmud, Baba Bathra 21a to b. However, as biblical Hebrew was no longer in use as a spoken language among the Jews, and in order to avoid ambiguities in the text by ensuring that the correct pronunciation was not lost, Jewish textual scholars between the 15th and 18th centuries AD, between the 5th and 8th centuries AD, devised and inserted into the Old Testament text a system of vowel points to guide readers in how the words should be correctly vocalized and accented. These Jewish scribes, known as Masoretes, from the Hebrew Masorah, what was handed down, i.e. tradition, applied this system of pointing by adding marks, dots, and strokes around the consonants without disturbing or changing any of them. The Masoretes thus pointed the Hebrew text of the Old Testament with symbols indicating vowel sounds so that the traditional way scripture had been read and heard in the synagogues would be preserved, even though biblical Hebrew was ceasing to be spoken among the Jewish people. Here is an example of the word king in unpointed and pointed form. So the unpointed form, you have the word there in the MLK, and the pointed form, they're the same thing. There's these little, if you're just listening, there's these little dots under it, right? So it literally does not change at all, but there's little dots added under it. And then you have Melek, M-E-L-E-K, is how it's transliterated. In addition to providing guidance as to which vowels occur within a word, the Masoretic pointing also distinguishes between different pronunciations of the same letter. The so-called Beged Kefeth letters, B, G, D, K, P, and T, also had the spirant or fricative pronunciation b, g, d, k, f, and th. Now, for those of you who do know Hebrew, I probably messed that up. So I did my best here. So first time going through this, as I said before, I don't know Hebrew, so I'm trying there. A single dot called a dagesh inside the letter, for example, and they give an example of a dot inside a letter, would specify the hard pronunciation b rather than the soft pronunciation. Oh, okay, so b, so b, or I guess that's how, etc. By the position of a point, Masoretic notation also distinguished two different sounds that lay behind the Hebrew letter Vav. Wait, what letter is that? Hold on a second. Let me get that. Oh, sin. The Hebrew letter there, and that's the sin. Hebrew sin represented S, sin, and this shin represented shin. Medieval Hebrew manuscripts also contain a further set of marks known as accents or cantillation signs, which indicate division and cohesion in the text and specify the way the text should be sung in the synagogue. Masoretes actively worked in three areas: Babylon, Palestine, and Tiberias. And eventually, it was the tradition from Tiberias called Tiberian vocalization, particularly the work of Ben Asher of the Ben Asher family in Tiberias circa AD 900, which is preserved in the Hebrew Bible today. That is the Masoretic text. Okay, so this the Masoretic text that the ESV Bible is translated from. Thus, also the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia (BHS). However, a further guide to the historical pronunciation of words is available in the tradition of pronunciation of the Pentateuch among the Samaritans. On the surface, the Samaritan pronunciation usually seems rather different from the Tiberian vocalization. Yet, when historical sound changes are taken into account, it often shows regular correspondence to that of the Masoretes. This is, I don't know about you guys, but to me, this is very fascinating. Also, too, this to me, this speaks to the veracity of the text. You have, these different gaps in time happening, and I think for some people that might make their level of confidence in the text go down, but for me, it makes it go up. Because even though we see these gaps, these gaps in time, as they go back into the text, it seems like there is the text itself is not changing, right? But there is, we talked about before the human hand that is within the Bible, or within trying to get the Bible from generation to generation, and that human hand seems to be very dedicated to trying to get the text and the information of the text to the next generation. But then also too, seeing the presence of the Samaritan Pentateuch, right, which is different from the Jewish Pentateuch, what we have. However, it is not so different to where there's a massive difference in what is happening within the text, right? So as we saw earlier, we were talking about Abraham and when he left for the land of Canaan, right? Did he leave when Terah was before Terah died or after Terah died, right? Or did Terah die at 205 or 145? Well, whether he died at 205 or 145, he died. Okay. Whether or not um, Abraham left after he died or before he died, he left. Right. Whether or not God told him while he was in Mesopotamia or not, God told him. Right. And so there might be little nuances of the story that might change, but the story as a whole does not change. Right. Terah had a son, Abraham. Abraham heard from God to leave his family and go from Mesopotamia uh, uh, to um, to the land of Canaan. And he leaves from Haran. In both stories, he leaves from Haran to go to the land of Canaan. So, I don't know. Pretty cool to me. Verbal system. Almost all Hebrew words are built upon 3 root or stem consonants, alluded to above, though these will rarely appear in the text without any accompanying affix of some kind. There are 7 main stem formations, or binyanim, of Hebrew verbs: kal, nafal, pael, hual, hithpael, hifil, and hafal. Each of these 7 divisions conveys something different about the relationship between the subject and the verb action: active, passive, reflexive, causative, etc. And these are apparent by the characteristic changes that the same 3 consonant verbal stem undergoes within each division, though most verbs do not occur in all 7 stem formations. The many structural differences between Hebrew and English influence translation, whereas English has a system of verbal tenses, i.e., time of action, past, present, future, etc. Many grammarians prefer to say that Hebrew has 2 verbal aspects, that is, kind of action, complete and incomplete, etc., known as the perfect and imperfect. That's pretty significant there, right? So for us, we have he did, he is doing, he will do, right? But for Hebrew, it's more like he did, and he, or it will be done, right? Done or it will be done, right? It's it, right? So perfect, imperfect, right? Pretty cool there. In the simplest terms, these aspects consider actions as either complete or incomplete, respectively. Thus, the Hebrew imperfect is frequently used for referring both to events in the future and to repeated events in the past. And read it again. Thus, the Hebrew imperfect is frequently used for referring both to events in the future and to repeated events in the past. A further complication is the relationship that the perfect and the imperfect verb have with the conjunction and. Hebrew wall. It's pronounced W-A-W, wall, I guess. Before I move on, so this idea of the imperfect is frequently used for referring to events in the future and repeated events in the past, right? So because they're concerned with imperfect or incomplete, right? So I will make my bed in the morning, right? It's almost said the same way if I say I've made my bed up every day this week, because it's not completed, right? I guess that's what they're getting at, right? Because it's a repeated event, right? The making up of the bed is it's not a closed thing where it's just done, right? So where I in English can say, I will make up my bed in the morning after I get up. I did make my bed up this morning, right? And so the I did closes that, right? Or as I'm making up my bed, I can say I am making up my bed right now. But in Hebrew, the the me saying that I've made up my bed every day this week, it would say it as if it's incomplete, right? Because it's an action that has to keep going. Just like if I said I will make my bed up in the morning, right? I think that's what they're saying. That's how I'm understanding it. Maybe someone who knows better can comment and correct me. When the wall attaches to a prefix as a prefix to a perfect or imperfect verb, it may at times appear to reverse the function of the perfect or imperfect aspect so that the perfect then communicates incomplete action and the imperfect communicates complete action, even if from a historical perspective, this is not actually what is happening. It actually preserves an old tense form. My bad. I'm gonna have to read that again because I didn't understand anything, because I was thinking about, so maybe about a month ago, or no, it's a couple months ago because it was in October. A few months ago, I went to a like a preaching conference thing, and at this preaching conference, one of the exercises you do is, you get about 6-7 guys in there, and a couple of people have to look at a text and make an outline basically about how they were preaching and answer three different questions about it. And then once they put together an outline, they present it to the group, and then the group goes and kind of tears it up and tell them whether they're wrong or whatnot. And I remember getting into an argument with a guy that was there who is a professor of New Testament, might I add, about the meaning of a particular text. And the text we were in was in Job. And he is reading. I have my little ESV Bible in front of me, and he has pulled up on his computer the Hebrew. And so in the middle of the discussion, he's trying to say something about what something means. And he brings this up. He's like, well, it has a wall. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And so now I know what he's talking about. He's like, well, the word here has a wall on it. So and I had no idea what he was talking about. In the middle of me, telling him how right I am and how wrong he is. But so he was talking about this thing right here. So let me read that again, so that I can understand it. And then if I need to comment, I'll comment. But that's what was going on in my head as I was reading this sentence. All right. So when wall attaches as a prefix to a perfect or imperfect verb, it may at times appear to reverse the function of the perfect or imperfect aspect. Okay. So that the perfect then communicates incomplete action and the imperfect communicates complete action. Even if from a historical perspective, this is not actually what is happening, it actually preserves an old tense form. Oh, okay. All right. So the wall can change the whole deal. All right. So that's what he was getting at. And I knew what I knew, even though he knew more than me, man. So hey, pride comes before the fall, man. Pride comes before the fall. All right. Such differences between the Hebrew and English verbal systems can make translation difficult at times. However, in most prose texts, the temporal location of the narrative is immediately clear, and consequently, so is the way in which one should render a passage. Poetic texts are more complex, but there is still a surprising agreement between English translations as to which tense to use. Hey, now Job is poetic, so all I'm saying is I could have been right. No, maybe I was probably wrong. I was probably wrong. But they said the poetic texts are more complex, so and I was going with whatever the ESV had said. He was going by the Hebrew, and he was making decisions on his own. And so I was just going off of what the ESV was saying. So I was agreeing with the ESV. All right. The wall particle. Closely connected with the verbal system is the ubiquity of the wall and in the Hebrew Bible. It is used to begin with no previous connection with another narrative. For example, Esther, Ezekiel, Jonah, and is the main particle connecting clauses in prose texts. Although Hebrew has some particles that carry senses such as but, therefore, and because, these words are less commonly used than wall, which in connection with various clauses can be rendered by a range of terms. The ESV renders wall by the neutral and, where appropriate, but also uses words such as now, Judges 2:1, so, Judges 2:14, then, Judges 2:16, and but, Judges 2:19, when the context calls for it. That's pretty cool, man. I mean, I know for some folks, y'all are listening to this, like, if you're still here, like, man, can we get this thing over with? Why do we have to read this article? Why do we have to start with this article? But to me, I mean, even getting stuff like that, man, like, hey, look, in the Hebrew, there's this, this wall thing, and it's sitting by itself, and so we have to make decisions on, on how we're going to translate it. And in some areas we translate it this way, in other areas we translate it this way. And so now when we get to the book of Judges, right, I'll try to remember, like, okay, hey, in the same chapter, only a few verses, right, you get the same, little mark here. And instead of saying and, or as I say now, then they say so, then they say then they say but, it's pretty cool, man. At least to me it is. I always tell people, man, don't tell me what a good time. This right here, to me, is a good time. It's a good time. All right, prepositions. Hebrew also has fewer prepositions than English, with the result that the same Hebrew preposition can be rendered in a variety of ways. For instance, renderings of the preposition be can include in, on, by, and with. Hebrew has no word for of. Wow. But the possessive and other relationships expressed by English of can be represented in Hebrew by using the construct state. In the construct state, a noun is placed immediately before another noun in an inseparable attached position. Sometimes this involves a change in the form of the first noun as it loses stress. Thus, the underlined word is in the construct state. In the following examples, Melech, king, plus Yisrael, Israel. So Melech Israel equals king of Israel. Malka, queen, plus Yisrael, Israel. Malkat Yisrael, queen of Israel. Articles. Hebrew has a definite article, H, precedes the noun usually with a short, let me start over. Hebrew has a definite article, H, precedes the noun usually with a short A vowel, and it shows a sign there, and doubling of the initial consonant of the noun. there is no indefinite article in biblical Hebrew. Thus, Melech means king or a king, but Hamelech means the king. Okay. So we would have like a king or the king. It's like a whole different word. In poetic texts, however, the definite article is used more sparingly, and it is therefore sometimes legitimate to use a definite article in translating. All right, and so it shows this chart here, transliteration of words, transliteration of Hebrew words in ESV Study Bible, consonants. So it shows how they get to certain things there. Let's go to the next page. All right, so let me finish. So the last sentence we were reading. In poetic text, however, the definite article is used more sparingly, and it is therefore sometimes legitimate to use a definite article in translating a Hebrew phrase that lacks one, as in the ESV rendering of "in the scroll of the book" in Psalm 40, verse 7. So the Hebrew probably reads in scroll book, because it said it doesn't have a of, right? Hebrew has no word for of. Yeah. So Hebrew has no word for of. So the Hebrew probably says in scroll book, but the way they render it is in the scroll of the book. So shows the different decisions that are made there. All right. All right. Gender and numbers. Hebrew has two genders, masculine and feminine, and three numbers, singular, dual, and plural. The dual is used only to refer to two items that occur in a pair. For example, eyes, knees, teeth, millstones. Verbs and pronouns also distinguish between a masculine and a feminine form of the second person you, in singular and plural forms, and between a masculine and feminine form of the third person plural they. The distinctive between the genders of the pronouns plays a significant part in the ESV identification of speakers in the Song of Solomon. See, for example, ESV footnote on Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 11. Let's see. I'll read that real quick. So I don't have a picture of it, so you won't see it on the screen, but I'll go to it. Just because, man, hey, this stuff is very interesting to me. I know, like I said, for some people, might be eyes might be glazing over right now, man. But again, like I said, when I started this thing, when I started this project, I said I was doing it selfishly, right? Because I wanted something like this to be able to listen to myself, but I didn't have it. I couldn't find it. So now that I'm doing it, hey, I get to make certain decisions. All right. So I'll read the verse. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 11. We will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver. And the note says, within the Song of Solomon, the use of jewelry to heighten beauty is seen as natural and good. In chapter 1, verse 11, the chorus speaks to the woman, you is feminine, picking up from her comment in verse 10. Okay. So I guess that helps the in the Hebrew, that helps to know who's being spoken to, right? Because there's two different people, girl and a guy, and there's someone in between them speaking to either one that says you. The masculine or feminine you helps to know who's the you being spoken to or about, or say I guess being spoken to in the text. So good deal. All right, diversity. The Hebrew of the Old Testament is not uniform. Certain songs, such as the Song of Deborah in Judges chapter 5 and the Song of Moses in Exodus chapter 15, verses 1 to 18, display archaic linguistic features. Though there's still a strong underlying linguistic unity in the Old Testament, the language found throughout the 39 books shows that the Old Testament was composed over a considerable period of time. Moreover, the language of the Old Testament also reflects dialectical. It's not that. Dialectal differences. Cross-reference Judges chapter 12, verse 6. Occasionally, features of certain Old Testament texts are identified by scholars as coming from the northern kingdom, Israel, as opposed to Judah, for example. All right. So this, I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty cool too reading this because they're saying, different understandings of different things that are happening in the language and can help them identify where a particular text came from. Right. It shows the span of time. Right. Just the way that the language is used throughout the Old Testament. Right. And so this is an argument against the late dating for all of the books, right? Because the way that the language is used. So even if the presence of the later script might lend somebody to saying that something like the Book of Genesis should have a later date, what they're saying is that the use of the language, the way that the language is used, the way the words are said, can kind of says that, hey, look, this should be dated earlier, right? So if somebody found a writing of Shakespeare, right, in 2026, and they read it, right, and they're like, oh, okay, hey, this is from 2026. Someone says, no, that sounds like old Shakespearean English. That's 400, 500, 600 years, beforehand. My apologies for not knowing exactly when Shakespeare lived and wrote. So, but it's 300 years from this time. Aramaic. The term Aramaic comes from the people of Aram, an ancient region of Upper Mesopotamia. The Arameans, whom old Akkadian writings mention as early as the 3rd millennium BC, during the 8th and 7th centuries BC, the Assyrian Empire controlled much of the ancient Near East. And Aramaic spread in usage as an international language. Cross-reference 2 Kings chapter 18:26 and Isaiah chapter 36:11, until the Persian Empire of the 6th century BC established it as the official language. The few Aramaic sections of the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 31 verse 47, Ezra chapter 4 verse 8 to chapter 6 verse 18, chapter 7 verses 12 to 26, and Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 11, and Daniel chapter 2 verse 4 to chapter 7 verse 28 fit clearly within the category of Imperial Aramaic, the language of Persian administration. Much of the grammatical description of biblical Hebrew given above could, with minor changes, also apply to Aramaic. Eventually, Aramaic came into daily use with many Jews, especially those in Galilee. Aramaic words appear in the New Testament on the lips of Jesus. For example, Mark chapter 5, verse 41, chapter 7, verse 34. And the name of Golgotha, Mark chapter 15, verse 22, is Aramaic in form. The term of respectful address, Abba, seems also to be Aramaic, but became standard in later Hebrew as well. The expression Ephatha, be opened, Mark chapter 7, verse 34, may be Aramaic, though some think it is the equivalent form in Hebrew. Paul uses the Aramaic expression Maranatha, our Lord, come, in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 22. Conclusion. While biblical Hebrew enjoyed over 1,000 years of existence as a spoken language, from the middle of the second millennium BC until the close of the BC era, it has never truly died, but continues to thrive today through the perpetual study and translation of the writings of the Old Testament scriptures. Furthermore, it is still actively spoken and used in Jewish religious life and synagogues around the world. It is taught and passed down in both Christian seminaries and Jewish yeshivas. And because of its use by God as the language of the Old Testament, it will continue to enjoy a detailed preservation and rich textual tradition virtually unparalleled by any other ancient language. It's awesome. And that's it. Yeah, to me that was pretty cool. I don't know how long our session was tonight, but I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed getting to know and understand a little bit more about the Hebrew language. Like I said, I have not taken Hebrew. I don't know the language. Might know a few words here or there, but that's about it. And I wouldn't know. It's not the same. I wouldn't know what they look like if somebody handed me, them on a slip of paper in actual Hebrew. But also too, knowing that at least the scholars here at within the ESV Study Bible seem to have a great command of the language, and so I know sometimes one of the ways that people try to discredit the Bible is like, oh, well, it was written in another language. You can't really know and understand exactly what it was in English, but they seem to, per this article, seem to have a great grasp on the biblical Hebrew language there. So it's pretty cool. All right. Well, this is it for our day 3, Genesis chapter 9 through 11, along with us reading the article on the original languages. Oh, no, this is not it. Sorry. I was about to sign off. This is not it. As we saw here, there are some terms in the Hebrew, or some words that we have in English that the Hebrew does not have, right? Or where they might have to add a word or change a word, into English to make the English to help with understanding what is trying to be communicated, right? And I talked about when we were doing the preface, when there was we were trying to understand how the ESV translation came about. And what I was trying to explain was that what many people think is that there's a telephone game, right? And where, there's 100 people in line, and person one whispers in the ear of person two, who whispers in the ear of person three, who whispers in the ear of person four, all the way down to the person number 99, whose ear is being whispered into by person number 98, who whispers into the ear of person 100. And then we try to see, hey, what did person one say by person 100? And, all kind of messed up. Where this is not necessarily what happens. What happens is every time someone, at least for the English versions, what they do is every time someone says something, right? So you get person 35 goes back to person number one, and tries to understand what they say, and then they go and hear from person 2 to 34. And before they say something to person 36, they take into account, hey, this is our understanding of what person 30 or what person one said, and we think this is what person one said, and so we're going to communicate it to person 36. But we know that person 36 has probably heard from or heard about how person 2 to 34 has translated what person number one said, right? And so we're going to keep that in mind when we decide to speak to person number 36 about what person number one said, right? And so the example that I had given was this idea of equal weights and measures, right? And I said that that in our Bibles, in our English version, they'll render it, equal weights and measures, where that idea is presented by the Hebrew in Hebrew as stone, which is not correct. It is rendered stone is I was remembering it wrong. Stone is a part of it, but it's more like just stone, right? And so I'll give you the example here. Let's do this here. Let's do that for a second. Bring this over here. So we just go back and forth to that. All right. So in Leviticus 19, verse 36, so let me go to let's go to the ESV of how it actually reads. Actually, okay, let me do this. So there's this website called Bible Hub, and if you go to Bible Hub and then you Leviticus 19:36, right? So you go to Bible Hub and you search for that verse. Okay, this is a free resource you can go to. So you search for that verse, it's going to give you that verse, but in a bunch of different English translations, right? And so the NIV, the New International Version, says, use honest scales and honest weights, and honest ephah and honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, right? The New Living Translation, your scales and weights must be accurate. The English Standard Translation, you should have just balances, just weights, just ephah, da, da, da. All right, let's do the King James real quick. Just balances, just weights, and a just ephah and a just hin. All right, so this idea, just weights, honest weights. Your scales and weights must be accurate. All right. Well, let's look at now, what is the word for weights? Okay. And so on here, there's what's called an interlinear Bible. right? Where there's like the English on one level, and then the Hebrew or the Greek or the Aramaic on another level, right? And so you can see how it's being translated. So here they have a link where you can go to the Analytiker Bible, okay? And you can read it. So remember, Hebrew reads from left to right. So you have scales, honest, weights, honest, ephah and ephah, honest, and hin, honest, half, you shall. All right. So there's this. You can tell this word sadek, sadek, right? Honest, honest, honest. All right. It's repeated. All right. So and then there's this thing called the Strong's Concordance, right, where it gives a number to every word in Hebrew and Greek. And so the Strong's Concordance number is up here, 664, right? And so and then you get like the phonetic sounding of the words and everything right there, right? So scales as a mozene, and then weights as abne. But if we look at the if we click on here to get the actual word, right? The word is stone. Okay, eben. So it says it could be, stone, stone, or weight, but it's stone, right? So really what it's, the way that it can be said is have a just stone, right? A just stone, right? Let's look at Bible Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1. The reason why I even know this is I was trying to have a conversation with a friend of mine, a guy who's actually a mentor of mine, one of my marriage mentors. Shout out to Chris, my marriage mentor. I was trying to have a conversation with him about something else, and I was like, hey, God says that I have equal weights and measures, right? And so I brought up Proverbs chapter 11, and he was like, well, let's look at the Hebrew to see, like, what it is. And then he brought up the stone thing. I was like, oh, snap, yeah, hey, we'll see. All right. So a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Okay. We'll read the NIV. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. All right. The New Living Translation, the Lord detests the use of dishonest scales, but he delights in accurate weights. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so he doesn't like a false balance, but a just weight. And when he pulled up the Hebrew said a just stone. And I was like, man, what? How did he get there? And so I'm saying that to say, when the English translation says that they look at their previous English translations, right, and they keep in line with that, it's not like they are translating from that. They're translating from the original Hebrew, but keeping in mind how things have already been translated, right? Because there are some words that have come into the English lexicon from the Bible, right? And that has just become a part of English speaking, right? And so, with that, they say, okay, hey, we can keep this in, right? However, um, uh, sometimes, some phrases or certain things that are in Hebrew, they can't just render it the same, because if they do so, we wouldn't even know what to do. So if they put here, right, his delight, or all right, scales dishonest to, or an abomination to Yahweh, um, but uh, a stone just. So a just stone, he delights in. He delights in the just stone. Man, we wouldn't know what to do with that, right? So I brought that up, and to give you guys one more last little thing, little resource on it. There's Dr. Claude Mariottini, Dr. Claude Mariottini. He has a blog, and he is a professor of Old Testament at Northern Baptist Seminary, and so he'll write on certain things here and there, and he has this article on establishing weights and measures in ancient Israel. And there's a portion here that I marked out to read, just to help to see why they chose weights, and even though the word stone is there. All right, so here's this part: precious material and metals are weighed on balances with two scales. The weights were made of hard stones called eben, a Hebrew word which means stone and weight. These weights are kept in a bag. Deuteronomy 25:13, Micah 6:11, Proverbs 16:11. The Hebrew word that means to weigh is shekel, from which the word shekel is taken. Thus, the shekel became the basic unit of weight. The value of the shekel was equivalent to the weight of 180 grains of wheat. The Old Testament mentions two kinds of shekels: the king's shekel, or the royal standard, 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 26, and the shekel of the sanctuary, Exodus chapter 30, verse 13. Genesis 23:16 speaks about the shekel current among the merchants. However, it is difficult to determine the value of this shekel, since the Bible says that many merchants had two kinds of weight, one for buying and one for selling. All right, so it talks about them using the weight for the stone, and the shekel for buying and selling. And then this, try to make sure, this here is relevant for what we were talking about. All right. For a system of weights, so laws about weights and measures. For a system of weights, measures of length, and measures of capacity to be fair, it requires the sanction of authoritative law in order to ensure the weights and scales used for buying and selling conform to a standard set by the community. The law about weights and measures found in the book of Deuteronomy was enacted in order to promote economic honesty in buying and selling. You must not have two different weights in your bag, one heavy and one light. You must not have two different dry measures in your house, a larger and a smaller. You must have a full and honest weight, a full and honest dry measure, right? So a full and honest stone. So if you're using stones to weigh things, to say like, hey, okay, hey, here's equivalent weight. This is equivalent pricing, whatever, right? You can't have a fake one. So basically, for our day, it would be like, you can't have a false dollar bill, right? You got to have something where you can't even walk around with it. So this law right here, Deuteronomy 25, you can't even walk around with a false weight. So for our day, our personal application, you can't even walk around with fake money, right? That might give the impression of trying to use it falsely, right? So that's what we have there. Hopefully that clarifies what I was trying to explain over three. This is not the third time I'm bringing this up, but again, all this is trying to help you guys not only to understand the Bible, to have confidence in what you are currently reading, right? Even though you may not know biblical Hebrew, you don't have to in order to have confidence in what you are reading. As long as you have a good, solid English translation, um, or go to something like a Bible Hub, or or even a Bible Gateway. They have it to where you can look at different versions. All right. Again, I think the first episode of this on day one, I said that we should be reading multiple versions of the Bible in order to make sure that we have that we're getting the sense of what was said in the original, right? So yes, hopefully this helps. Thank you for being there with me and making it to the end here. I hope this is beneficial to you, and I hope the Lord continues to bless you with it. It's in Jesus' name, amen.